All right, we are going way back, and I mean way back. Not just a few centuries, but tens of thousands of years, right to the very dawn of the human spirit. We're going to explore the birth of belief itself. We're going to look at the mental tools our ancestors developed to make sense of a world that must have seemed pretty mysterious. So let me start by asking you a question. Just think about it for a second. What do you think is the single most powerful tool humans ever invented? I mean, the one thing that truly set us apart, the invention that kickstarted, well, everything that came after.
Now, I bet your mind immediately goes to something physical, right? Something you can hold. Maybe fire? I mean, controlling fire was huge. It gave us warmth, protection, cooked food. Or what about the spear? That definitely turned us into top-tier predators. And look, those were absolutely revolutionary. No doubt about it. But they weren't it. They weren't the most powerful tool.
The real game changer, it wasn't something you could hold in your hand. It was all in our heads. It was the birth of the imagination. You know, that ability to think in the abstract, to dream up things that don't physically exist, to create symbols, to tell stories, to see what isn't there. This was like the ultimate software update for the human brain, and it changed everything.
Okay, that's a big claim, right? So how on earth can we possibly know when this software update happened? Well, lucky for us, our ancestors left behind some clues. Let's take a look at the very first piece of solid evidence, proof that this incredible leap in thinking had actually happened.
This is the Lion Man. It's carved from mammoth ivory, and it represents something that is just, well, it's extraordinary. Because think about it. There are no lion-headed people walking around in the real world. This is a hybrid, a being that's part human, part cave lion, which was, by the way, the most terrifying predator around back then. So this thing, this physical object, it was born entirely from an idea, from someone's imagination. And get this, it's 40,000 years old. Just let that number sink in for a second. To put that into perspective, that's more than 20 times older than the entire Roman Empire. So this wasn't some recent flash in the pan. This ability to think in symbols, to imagine gods and spirits, it's been a fundamental part of being human for a stretch of time that's honestly hard to even wrap your head around. And here's the kicker. Archaeologists figure it took something like 400 hours to carve this thing with simple flint tools. Now, think about what that means. If you're a hunter-gatherer, every single hour of your day is about survival. Finding food, finding water, not getting eaten. So to spend 400 hours on this, that is a massive investment of time and energy. This wasn't just a little doodle somebody made when they were bored. This object was clearly incredibly important to them. The Lion Man puts us right in the middle of a period that anthropologists have a name for, behavioral modernity. And really, all that means is this is the point in history where we started acting like us, making art, using complex language, building these rich, symbolic cultures that really define what it means to be human.
Okay, so our ancestors could imagine these other worlds, these spirit realms. But here's the next logical question, right? How do they try to actually go there, to visit them? And that question, well, it leads us straight to the very first organized spiritual practices we know of.
For these small, nomadic hunter-gatherer groups, the earliest version of what you might call religion was shamanism. But this wasn't about, holy books or strict rules. It was all about direct experience. It revolved around a specialist, the shaman, who was believed to be able to actually journey into the spirit world and come back. And they didn't just wing it. They had a whole toolkit for this, a kind of ritual technology, if you will. For instance, they'd go deep into caves for total sensory deprivation, absolute darkness and silence. Or they do the opposite, sensory overload, with non-stop drumming and chanting. And yeah, sometimes they use psychoactive plants, what we call entheogens. But the goal was always the same, to trigger a trance, an altered state of consciousness, where they believed they could literally interact with the spirit world. And this is where things get really fascinating. This brings us to one of the most beautiful and honestly mysterious legacies of that entire era. Because the visions these shamans had, they didn't just stay in their heads. They brought them back. And they painted them on the walls of those very same caves. And you know what? There's a really cool scientific theory that tries to explain this. It's called the Neuropsychological Model. And the basic idea is that all those weird geometric patterns, the strange figures you see in ancient cave art, they're not just random scribbles. The theory is that they are literal depictions of the hallucinations, the visual phenomena that people see when they're in a trance. And this is where it all clicks into place. Modern research, when people go into these altered states, they report seeing specific things: geometric grids, dots, zigzags. They also report seeing therianthropes. That's the technical term for those part human, part animal beings, exactly like the Lion Man. So now look at the actual art from famous caves like Lascaux or Chauvet. You see the same grids, the same dots, the same hybrid creatures. The connection is it's undeniable. It's like a map of another consciousness, painted right onto stone.
But this whole explosion of symbolic thinking wasn't just stuck on cave walls in the dark. No, it was a portable culture. It was a language of symbols that traveled with people as they moved, spreading across huge distances. And maybe the best evidence we have for this comes in a much, much smaller package.
I'm talking about these Venus figurines, and these things are found everywhere, from France all the way to Siberia. Now, what were they for? Honestly, we don't know for sure. That's part of the mystery. Were they idols of a mother goddess? Maybe. Or were they more like survival tokens, highlighting the importance of body fat for surviving brutal winters and, of course, for fertility? We can't say for certain, but here's what we do know. They represent a shared set of ideas, a common symbolic language that connected all these different scattered groups of people.
Now, as we're putting together this puzzle of the ancient past, it's really important to remember something crucial about science. It's always a work in progress. It corrects itself. And sometimes the most romantic, beautiful stories we tell ourselves about the past, well, they just don't hold up when new evidence comes along.
And the classic case study for this is the famous flower burial at Shanidar Cave. For decades, the story we told was incredible. It was that Neanderthals had intentionally buried one of their dead on a bed of flowers. I mean, it's such a touching, modern-seeming act, right? It suggested they had these complex, ritualistic beliefs about death.
But recent, much more advanced analysis of the site tells a totally different story. A much less romantic one, I have to say. It turns out those clumps of flower pollen found with the skeleton, they weren't put there by grieving Neanderthals. The new evidence points to burrowing bees. Yep, bees brought the pollen into the cave, and it just happened to get concentrated in that spot. And it's just a perfect example of how science has to update its own stories, and how careful we have to be to separate what looks like a ritual from what might just be nature doing its thing.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We've got symbolic art, these intense shamanic journeys, artifacts being shared across continents. It all leads to one final really big question. Why? What was the point of all this? What function did it serve?
The answer, according to a lot of researchers, lies at something called the Imagistic Mode of Religiosity. It sounds complicated, but the idea is pretty simple. Unlike a lot of modern religions that are based on texts and daily practice, these early beliefs were built around rituals that were rare but incredibly intense. We're talking high-arousal, sometimes terrifying experiences, like a scary initiation rite or a really powerful trance. And the whole goal was to create what psychologists call identity fusion, this deep, gut-level feeling of being one with your group.
So you see, at the end of the day, this wasn't just about believing in spirits. This was a survival technology. In a really dangerous world, having these intense shared emotional experiences, that's what created unbreakable bonds. It built trust. It forced cooperation within these small, fragile groups. It was the social glue that held the very first human societies together.
It's just an incredible story when you think about it. It all starts with a little spark of imagination in one person's mind, the idea to see a lion and a man as one thing. And that tiny spark, it grows into the ritual fire that forges identity, community, and ultimately, the very first human societies.
And that leaves us with one last thought to chew on. Those ancient, intense rituals were the perfect tool for binding a small group of people together, making them feel like a single entity. But today, well, we live in a world of billions, right? We're often connected more by screens than by a shared campfire. So it makes you wonder, in our massive, modern world, what truly binds us together now?